Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to continue to look at some Python coding techniques that we will need later in the semester. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. All right. So last time we looked at strings, we looked at for loop.
I was, tr- I was trying to hit the escape button, and
Someone's mic. But yeah, so last time we looked at strings, print statements, for loops, while loops, the range function, um, and we looked at lists. The last thing we left on was lists. So, for example, uh, this is a list. So maybe like L is equal to, I don't know, 12, 2, 4, I don't know, 11, 23, 7. Okay, so that's a list, and then maybe we can have another list. Well, let's just play with this list first. So here's our list, and suppose we want to print out the elements in this list. So those of you that have had programming experience in the past would probably want to index through this list. So maybe like a for loop. So for I in range, well, how many things are in here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what happens if we do Brian range 6, print, and let's see, just see what this does. Okay, so print L 5. So let's run this and see what this does. So we see that we have printed out each of these things, okay? So suppose we didn't know how many things were in L, we could also have done prime range of length of L, and then run this, and we see that we get the same thing, right? Because len of L is going to give us the number of things in L, number of elements in L. Now, this is this is okay, I guess, but this wouldn't be the way a Python programmer would print these things out. Um, so, so if you're going to do this in a Pythonic way, you could say something like, let's use a different letter for X in L, print X, okay? And we see that we get the same result. And that is because lists in Python are iterable objects. You don't need to know the details of that yet, but just basically Python knows that you can iterate through this. So what this will do, this will pick out the first thing, second thing, so forth and so on until you run out. And that will print all the things in L. Okay? So this is how you would scroll through the elements in an iterable object. Just say for X in the object, and then you can do whatever you want to. Okay, so suppose we want to make a list L equals to 4, 9, 16, 25, dot, 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 100. So notice these are all squares, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, and 10 squared, right? So suppose we want to make this list. Well, how can we do this? Well, we could do something like, so I guess I came from a C and C++ background when I taught myself Python. So my first instinct when learning to do this would be to start with an empty list, which acts like an empty vector in C++, and then say for X in range, I don't know, 11, right? What can we do? And we want to start at 2, right? So we can start at 2, right? For X in this range. We want to say L.append, this is the append method. that we talked about last time. So every object in Python has a method, and append is one of them. This is going to put objects into L. We want to do something like x squared. All right, so then let's run this and see what it does, and print out L. And we see that we got the result that we wanted here. Okay. Now, this works, right? This does work, but this wouldn't be necessarily the way that a Python programmer or developer would do this. They would do this using what's called list comprehension. We can create L using list comprehension. So let's make sure. So yeah, so list. All right, so instead of doing this, I'm just going to comment this out. So I can do that by just doing 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. So I just I've commented out this, so it's not gonna run. You can do that with the triple quotes there. And I don't even, well, I guess I can. So this right here is equivalent to saying this. L is equal to X for X in, or sorry, X squared for X in range 11. And we can print out L and see what this does. So this is list comprehension. You can put for loops and conditionals inside of the brackets here, and that will generate this L that we want. So if I press play here, forgot to start at 2. There. So we see that this created the same thing that this here did. Okay? So in Python, this would be the preferred way to do that. Okay. So for example, if we wanted to maybe print out all the even numbers between 0 and 100, right? So all the even numbers, we could do something like print, and we'll just throw this into a list comprehension. Real fast, I'll do 4, 0, so 4. So some of you may be familiar with modular functions, the modulus. So basically, if you use the percent sign, it gives you the remainder. So like 9 mod 2. So 2 goes into 9 4 times with the remainder of 1, right? So this just gives you the remainder. This is the modulus operator here. So notice that an even number, so 10 mod 2 is going to be 0. So if you do a number mod 2 and you get a remainder of 0, that means that you're going to be even. So if we want to print out all the even numbers between 0 and 100, we could do X for X in range 101, because we want to include 100 there. But then we can say if X mod 2 is equal to 0. So the double equal sign here is it's checking to see if these are equals. The single equal sign, if you remember, is an assignment. So let's see what this prints out. And we see that, oh, this gives all of the even numbers between 0 and 100. It makes a list like that. So we have what goes inside of it, X. Well, where does X come from? X is in the range of 0 to 100, right? But only if it's divisible by 2, meaning the remainder when you divide by 2 is 0. In a similar fashion, we could get all the odd numbers by doing not equal to 0. Right? So if the remainder isn't 0, then it's not divisible by 2. So if we run this, we should get all the odd numbers between 0 and 100. Okay, so that's list comprehension, right? You can put your for loops and conditionals inside, and it's really easy to read once you get used to it. So like, again, just kind of say it out loud with me to yourself, like, what goes inside this list? Well, X. Well, where does X come from? X is in the range there, only if this condition is satisfied. Okay, so that's list comprehension. Now I haven't mentioned this yet, but so suppose L is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lists don't necessarily have to contain numeric values. Like, for example, W could equal list of A, B, C, D, E. Okay. Now, suppose we wanted to combine these, right? Suppose we wanted to combine these somehow into tuples. So I'm going to leave these up here for a second. So these are our lists. So a tuple is a immutable, so you can't change tuples. Like, you can't make them bigger or larger. So this is a tuple. So like t is equal to 1, comma a. Like, that's a tuple. But in general, you can have n tuples. So this is a n tuple. So like t2 or something is equal to 1, comma a, comma 4, comma 10. And you can put whatever you want in these things. So in here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a 5 tuple. So these are tuples. And you can access elements of these things. So if I go to my variable explorer, I see what I have here. So T2 is that. So I don't know, T2 of 0 gives you the first entry, T2 of 1 gives you the A, so forth and so on. Okay, so these are tuples. And so lists, you can contract the size of them, you can expand the size of them, but tuples you cannot. Their size is set, and once it's set, you can't change that. So now suppose that we wanted to make something like this. Suppose we want to say, we want to make something like a list of tuples. Say 1, that, maybe 2, comma, that, dot, 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 5, comma, 3. So let's see, maybe we could do something like, so basically we can use these things here, right? Oh, sorry. We can use all this, the L and W to make this somehow. So maybe something like for X in L, maybe we can start with an empty list that we're gonna make this, right? So for X in L, for, let's see, how can we do this? Actually, I don't even like want to do this for loop. I'm just going to show you how you can do this in one line. Okay, so I'm going to say that A is equal to the list. I'm going to use list comprehension here. X or X in, and I'm going to use this function called zip. So let's see what this does. So print. So that's what we did. So what happened here? So zip. Well, you see 1A, 2B, 3C. 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E, right? So what happens if I change this around? Print that. Now we see A1, B2, C. So do you see what's happening here? So let me make another one, another list, Z or something, equals to, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now what happens if I do this? If I do zip of Z, right? So zip of W, L, and Z. So we see now that that's what we did here. So WLZ, WLZ. So A16, A16, right? B27, B27. So zip takes iterable objects, and so let's look at this comprehension here. So X, where does X come from? X is in zip of this. Well, there's our first X. It's a triple where the first entry comes from W, the second comes from L, and the third comes from Z. So A16. Here we have B27, B27. Right? You could switch these around maybe to get a better sense of what's going on. So maybe like L, Z, and then W, and see what this does. 16A, 16A. The next one should be 27B, 38B, 49C, 510B, right? So, or 49D, 38C, right? So that's what A is over here, right? So, and now we can access A by saying A of 0, it's that triple, right? So A of 1, it's the next triple, so forth and so on. So what this is doing is it's just making triples out of the pairwise elements of these lists here. Okay, so that's the zip function. This happens quite a bit. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so I'm going to clear out my variables here. Okay, so that's most of what we'll be doing with lists in this course, those basic operations, though you should be familiar with all the methods associated with lists, which you can look up the documentation online. So next, we're going to talk about dictionaries. So dictionaries are really useful when you have labels that are associated with data. So, all right, so let's look at the dictionary. Okay, so D is equal to Q. So open up curly braces. So the way that this works is we have keys and key values. So for example, I'll use like my name and then maybe my age. My birthday is on Monday, so I'll be 33. Let's see, Rachel is 30. Dr. Pepper or Ryan Pepper, the department chair, he is 44. So maybe like, so here, okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So we see D is a type of dictionary. D, if I do type of D, it's a dictionary. All right, so dictionaries, like all objects in Python, have methods to them. So if I do D dot keys, I see that this is a function or a method. We do D dot keys, and these are the keys of that dictionary. So if I want to access information here, I could say like D of the key Randy, I get 33. That's the value associated with that key. So if I do D of Rachel, I get 30. So you can see how this would be really useful when you have labels associated to data. Okay, so this is really useful. So let's make this dictionary a little bit uh, more informative. So maybe, well, actually, I should probably show you that you could say for x in D, print x and see what that does. So that prints out the keys. Okay. So think key dot values maybe. Oh yeah. So that's how you get the values. I just guessed that. Which in Python, when you're playing around with it, it's useful to just take guesses. Like once you understand that objects have methods, and you think that like you want to do something, just try typing it in and see what happens. You get an error, fine. But a lot of times it'll just work because Python is such a natural language to program. Okay, so let me see what else I want to say about dictionaries. Let's see. I guess they're pretty straightforward. I guess you can also use dictionaries with comprehension, list comprehension. So suppose I wanted to look at the squares again. So I could say something like x squared. So and x is the key, and the value is x squared for x in range 101. Close off those curly braces. So again, what's going in this dictionary? Well, the key x in the key value of x squared. So where does x come from? X is in the range here. So x is going to go from 0 to 100, right? But we wanted to start at 2 before, so I might as well do that again. So let's see what this does. There's my new dictionary. So if I look at D, we see that we have keys and then key values. So the key is the number and the key value is the square of the number. That's what this is right here. So you could say like, so what is the square? So you could use D to find the square of any number you want. I'd say like, I want to know the square of, I don't know, 86. That's 86 squared. Okay. So dictionaries are really useful, and they will be useful for our final project, which is going to be Python based. We're going to implement a famous algorithm on networks. Okay, so let's see if I want to go over anything else with dictionaries. Oh, you can also put in conditionals here. And so we can say that for x in there. And then suppose we only want to look at the squares of even numbers. We can put a conditional by saying if x mod 2 is equal to 0. So notice I can, if I wanted to, I can split my comprehension like this so it's a little bit easier to read. So what goes in this dictionary? X key and the key value squared for x from 2 to 100 only if it's divisible by 2, or when divided by 2 it has a remainder 0. So let's run that. So here's D now. So now if we look at the keys, it's all the even numbers between 0 and 100.
Question, how did you get from, or how did you create the dictionary to begin with? Did you have to click on anything specifically to get into that mode, or did you just made the comment, this is a dictionary, and then you created the dictionary?
I created the dictionary. So if you want to create a dictionary, there's a few ways to do this, but what I did is, so you use curly braces.
Okay.
And then once you use curly braces, you can just, you assign like, I don't know, like you make the
The list of,
and then you put in your conditions there.
okay.
Okay, so speaking of though, you can, just like we can start with an empty list, we can start with a empty dictionary. So you can do that by saying D and then there. So now this is an empty dictionary. so now D is an empty dictionary. And then if you wanted to put things in there, you can say like D is the key, Randy, and you can say this is equal to 30 or 33, run it. So now we've added that. So we started with an empty dictionary, and then you can add keys with the key value by doing this. Okay. So those are dictionaries. Okay. So, see, what other things can we do? I think that's about all I want to do with Python. So we can go ahead and stop here. And then over the weekend, I'm not going to have you turn it in, but I'm going to come up with a few assignments for you to practice programming in Python. And then on Monday, I'd like to get your feedback about questions about the problems. This will help me decide what types of questions that I will put on your first exam. So remember, next week, we're finishing up stuff, and then I'm going to give you the exam to take home on the weekend. So next weekend. So next week, we're going to start talking about the structure of the exam. I'm going to get a sense of where all of you are at, and that'll help me when I'm writing the exam. Okay. It's difficult for me because this is one of my first times teaching online, and I can't gauge where my students are at. So it'd be really important that the problems I give you to look at this weekend, I have feedback from all of you on Monday. That way I can write the exam accordingly. Okay? And we'll review on Wednesday of next week too. So don't stress out too much. My exams aren't too hard. So especially if you tell me what issues you're having next Monday. Okay, so that'll be it for today. Everyone stay safe, and you will receive an announcement on Blackboard whenever I post practice problems to look at this weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.